Welcome to the Bleeding Keyboard. I'll say that again because I stuttered over it. Welcome to the Bleeding Keyboard. With me today, I have got the incredible author, Ash Ericmore. And Ash, can you tell us which genre do you write in and how do you define that genre?
I write in extreme horror and splatterpunk, although I am veering a little bit more towards the extreme horror than the splatterpunk. For me, extreme horror will have acts above and beyond what you would normally find in mainstream horror. So above Stephen King from a smearing people's bodies and guts all over the floor, but to the side of extreme horror, I would say it's splatterpunk, where you really viscerally describe said blood and guts all over the floor. So I'm in extreme horror. Sometimes I write some splattery material, but I feel I'm more in just the extreme horror, sort of more aiming at someone like Sean Hudson rather than Edward Lee at the moment. I do swing, not in that way, sorry.
Yeah, good. This is kicking off to brilliant stuff. Would you say then there's an overlap between extreme and splatterpunk? Would you say that, or do you think that they are very differentiated?
Oh no, there's definitely a crossover. I do write splatterpunk, but it's mostly within my extreme horror. In one of the books that I've written recently, there are chapters that would be classed as splatter, but you can also have books that I would say are not extreme horror and just are splatterpunk. If you read someone like Matt Shaw, he writes some of his material, his black cover stuff, right, which is very very splattery, but it's not scary, it's not horror, it's disgusting, and it's great fun to read. But it's not horror in a traditional sense, whereas I think extreme horror is horror in a traditional sense, but they go hand in hand quite often.
Excellent, thank you. So Ash, what's your writing schedule?
It's all over the place. I write a lot. I can write sort of about 2,500 words an hour. And I personally find writing earlier in the day is better for me. So I can put 2 or 3 hours in the morning, if I'm lucky enough to be able to write all morning, and I'll knock out sort of 6,000 words. If I write in the evening, I can half that, so do 3,000 words in 3 hours. So I tend to write as early as I can in the day. If I'm on a day where I can work all day, I do work on my own book covers and my own formatting and editing. So I'll do all my writing first, and then I move on to other things, getting easier as the day goes on. So in the evening I'll work on book covers usually, because that's the fun part.
So if you produce in say 2.5K an hour early in the day, is that first draft quality, or is that stuff that needs to go through, and when do you find time for editing?
My first drafts are usually pretty good.
Right.
I'm one of those people that never switches off, so I have a tendency of thinking about my work a great deal. So I'll sit in the cinema and watch, let's say, The Last Jedi, and about 10 minutes into the film I'll switch off and I'll be thinking about something else entirely through the entire length of it, which was just as well. And
I've heard this, yeah.
And yeah, so I come down to actually putting the words on the page, and they flow out of me fairly well. So editing is an easier job. If you're aware of a gentleman by the name of Craig Martell, who runs the 20 to 50K Facebook group,
yeah,
he's the first person to tell you, if you can put out a good first draft, you can put out more words. As an indie, we're always expected to do our own editing and to a certain extent, a part of everything. We need to have an idea of what we want on our covers. We need to be able to get our work to a certain standard before it goes to an editor or a publisher, depending on whether you're self-publishing or small press or big press. Yeah, my first drafts come out fairly clear. It's usually structurally correct, so I pass it a few times to line edit, and then it's fairly much ready to publish.
I'm glad you mentioned structure there, because that gets me on to the next question, which is most important to you? Is it plot or is it character?
It depends what I'm writing. Some of my books are very heavily character based. I've got a series of books about a family called the Smalls, and they're very character driven stories. They're novelette length, so 6 or 7 of them will make a novel, but they're about the people, not so much the stories they're in. So they go into ridiculous situations that are absolutely silly, but it's about how they react to the situations. Yeah. But that's for a short work. For something that's novel length, 60,000, 70,000 words, it's much more forcing in a narrative to make sense, because 70,000 words is a lot to ask a reader to just be invested in a person rather than a story. Characters are very interesting, but generally 2 or 3 chapters into a novel, you need something to happen to them. So for a short work, I'm very character driven. For a long work, I'm more plot driven.
That's a really considered response. Yeah, and we will get back to that before the end of this. So what piece of writing advice would you give to anybody who's just starting out?
Write and read as much as you can. I know lots of people say, I don't have time to read. That's fine, but if you haven't got time to read, you haven't got time to write either. Writing lots and lots and lots will make you a better writer, but you need to understand some of the groundwork that's put into novels and storytelling that you can only get by either studying for the art or studying the art. So by all means, take Stephen King's On Writing book and read that, or just go and read Stephen King. You can learn from both of them, but you're going to have to read something at some point. But you've got to put words down. I thought I was doing okay, and then I realized that over the last couple of years, I've written probably over 1 million words a year, and I'm now starting to be able to structure books in my head without thinking about it. And I'm 2 million words in, and I read every day. And suddenly it's not just a case of, can I just do it? No, you've got to write and you've got to read, and you will eventually get there.
Yeah, I can't echo that one enough. This whole notion of people who go into writing and say, oh, well, I write such and such a genre, but I don't read it. In that case, how do you know you're writing in that genre? How do you, where are you getting your inspiration from? And people who say they don't read, I'm seldom without a couple of books on the go, and I stick audiobooks on whenever I'm at the gym or on a long drive. You just need story there for your own sanity and to build on your own experience. So who do you read for pleasure?
Right. Well, it's a big long list. I read quite wide and varied. I read a significant amount of indie horror, which I do predominantly for fun. I do read some of the masters of extreme horror and splatterpunk, people like Clive Barker and Edward Lee. I'm a huge fan of Sean Hudson. But I read people like Nat Wiston and Rain Havoc. They are newer voices, but they are fantastic voices. I've had the pleasure of actually working with both of them. And there are lots of relatively new, smaller authors that probably people say, oh, well, I haven't made it. Well, people will read you and you can make a living of this. No one will have heard of you outside of a small circle of people. So I can say the name Carver Pike, for example, who I know you're going to know. But people who read horror will go, oh, I've never heard of him. Well, no, because you read Stephen King. Carver Pike writes amazing work.
He really does, yeah.
He does. And people like R.J. Bonetti, the list is enormous. And you have to go and find them. So I read very wide and varied, but mostly horror. I have to say, I do read mostly horror and some humour. I read British humour quite a lot because I'm British.
Yeah, the list of names that you've got there, yeah, that's like the who's who really of some of the ones that are worth reading. And I know damn well there are going to be a lot of other people out there who neither of us have heard of, who were going to fall on their books one day and go, where have you been all my life?
Absolutely.
Right, so an important question. It's one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is anonymity. There's a lot of pressure that's placed on authors to be in front of cameras and to have an accessible presence on social media. You're a person who prefers anonymity. Do you think this cult of celebrity is unnecessary and potentially harmful to creativity?
It can be, certainly. I've been personally pressured by numerous people who are all well-wishers, who just want to know what I look like, and they want to face-to-face with me and talk to me. And I'm not that person. I'm very introverted, and I've got many reasons, and there are many reasons to not be out in the public eye, especially as a fiction writer, especially writing some of the things I write.
Yeah.
I write about extremely destructive things in an extremely destructive environment, without going into details, which are unsuitable for the people that I interact with on my day-to-day livelihood. My profession involves me working with vulnerable people, and whilst my writing has got nothing to do with that, the people who I work for would not be overly impressed to find out that I deal with vulnerable people during the day, and then I come home at night and write about pulling the arms off of babies. It's a reason for me to not be out in the public eye. And there are a great deal of creatives who are introverted and shy and don't want to be out there and waving at everyone. There is to a certain extent, you're going to have to get out on social media, but you can do it by being yourself, but being behind a shield, as I have. And you don't need to be out with your pictures, and it means you're going to miss out on a few things. You can't go to conventions unless you're going to go in full drag. I could do that. I've got a beard. I'd never get away with it. But yeah, I think personally for me and for a lot of people, I'm more comfortable being hidden away, and my process works better that way.
I get that, and I don't think that detracts from your work, and I think sort of like the pressure could, I mean, there's an awful lot of humour in your work, as well as engaging storytelling. And if as an author you've got that pressure to, oh, and I've got to be out there and I've got put my face on things, as you say, a lot of people out there can't separate the author from the work that they're producing. So, yeah, I mean, to take it to the Stephen King example, I've heard people say, "Oh, he's a horrible person," and yeah, I heard somebody saying he was racist the other day because there was somebody calling a black character the N-word in one of his novels. And no, that doesn't mean he's a racist. That means he's writing about people who do these horrible things there. But yeah, there are some people who are, I'm going to say the word thick, only because I think they're thick. But yeah, we've got people who are thick who can't tell the difference. So yeah, for a few years, I was writing erotica, and people were sort of like thinking, well, asking me, do you do all those things that you write about? And my first thoughts were, fucking wish. But yeah, the answer is, I'm a storyteller, and yeah, try not to, try not to get the writer confused with what they're writing about. So yeah, my next question is, I know you've collaborated with other authors on projects. Does collaborating take a different set of skills from solitary writing?
Yes. Yes and no. The core set of skills obviously is still that you still need to be able to get the words down on the page and construct a narrative. The difference is that that narrative needs to be constructed with somebody else, and there's a certain level of teamwork that you don't normally obviously experience. Being able to play with other people's characters is very challenging sometimes, and equally having your characters played with by other people can be quite challenging. I've not had a problem with anyone I've worked with, and I'm fairly sure that they're all happy with me as well. But yeah, you need to communicate and you need to work together, which is in itself a very different set of skills. The people that you're talking with, I've written books with people who I've never spoken to in real life. I've written books where I have communicated entirely through either messenger or email, and written a novel. That takes a set of incredibly careful communication skills, because it's very easy to upset people on DMs. And when you're telling them that their plot's wrong, yeah, it's a whole different ballgame than sitting down and just going, no, I'm going to do it like this, and just splurge the words in.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, as you say, the intimacy and the level of trust that's needed for other people to use your characters and for you to use somebody else's characters, that does take, yeah, that's potentially so intrusive, isn't it? And constructing a narrative, as you say, as part of a team, that's something that we don't ordinarily do. And we can sort of like approach that in such a blasé attitude. I mean, I might be thinking, well, I'm going to have this character and this character get together and do that, and then this will happen, then this will happen. And I might think to myself, oh no, screw it, that's stupid, and then just discard it altogether. But if I've got somebody else there, I've got to take care of their ego and make sure that whatever we were working on, I'm not saying your idea is crap. It's just, yeah. I mean, it's been a while since I've collaborated with anybody, and this is probably one of the reasons why now I think about it. Does this mean that you will be doing future collaborations with other authors?
I hope so. It was good. I've enjoyed writing with the people that I've written with greatly. It's also, for me, it helps me write because it takes away a little bit of the self-imposed work schedule and forces me into a more corporate work schedule, because I've got somebody expecting something from me, whereas everything is self-imposed normally. So, oh, this book needs to be finished by the 30th of the month, but, well, it doesn't really matter. It's not finished before Christmas because it's my schedule. Working with somebody else, yeah, I will have this to you by Friday means I will have this to you by Friday, even if it means midnight on Thursday. I'm still up doing it.
I love the sound of a corporate work schedule. Yeah, that's just that's going to be one of the key phrases that I use when this new semester starts. Yeah. Thank you for that, Ash. So yeah, my next question is, so your main genre of choice, as we discussed before, appears to be extreme horror, and this gives rise to two questions. Why the fascination with extreme horror?
Because it's great. I love to see people's brains custarding all over the floor. I just love it. I've always loved horror. I've always been a big fan of horror, and I've always enjoyed horror that's up from the mainstream. I mean, I watch PG-13 horror films because they exist, but I much prefer to watch Argento's films or Hellraiser. You know, the off mainstream, more colourful horror has always been for my taste. And yeah, over time, eventually, it just bled into all my reading, and yeah, I just love it. It's fun, it's funny, it's disgusting, and it's terrifying. I very rarely find a haunted house story gets my blood going, because, well, it's a ghost. It's not scary. Unless that ghost is pulling people's arms and legs off and beating other people to death with them, then that's a bit more scary.
Right, you just give me an idea for a ghost story now. Yeah, I will mention you in the dedication of that one. And yeah, my second part of that question about extreme horror is: do you think extreme horror, and I think this echoes back to what we were saying about character and plot, do you think extreme horror lends itself to the shorter length of the novella?
I think yeah, as I said earlier, to a certain extent, yes. Extreme and splatter are both easily put down to a novella length. Keeping splatter going to novel length is more of a challenge, but extreme horror, I think, works at novel length. You just need to sort of pace yourself a little bit. I would imagine that 70,000 words of splatterpunk is probably eventually quite dull. Once you hit 30,000 words of just people being eviscerated, you've got to have a plot in there to hit novel length. But yeah, you can put a novel length extreme horror together, but it has got to have a plot. So yeah, you can do it. It worked perfectly for novella length. My first, I think, probably, well, I've written about 40 extreme horror novellas,
Right.
and according to Goodreads the other day, I think I've got 62 books in it. So it reckons I've got 22 novels in it. That's not right. So it's something like that.
Excellent. My reason for asking about the length of shorter length of stories and their appeal within horror is because I was arguing with a student a couple of years ago. I always argue with students, and I was saying how horror is more effective when it's short, and the student said, well, what about Stephen King's It? That's about 1,000 pages long. And I said, yes, it is, but it's made up of all these little short horror incidents that are occurring, where you sort of like got the Losers Club, and you've got sort of like the backstory for each one of them, which is a short story within there. So yeah, I'd still stand by that horror does lend itself to shorter stuff, just because I think there's more of an impact in the sudden sharp boo and then running away.
Yeah, I do agree. If you look at some of my current work, it's usually something so similar to maybe how Sean Hudson might write, where you've got intersecting stories to make a whole. So yeah, you've got this story telling this, and they'll cross at the end, but for the most part, they're different stories twined together. And I have noticed also Edward Lee does that a lot as well. He'll do multiple story arcs for different characters that don't meet until the end of the story. So yeah, you're knitting together multiple novellas.
Yeah, this is pretty much what I've been trying to do with a lot of my recent stuff as well. And yeah, this ties into my final question too. So what are you currently working on, Ash, and where can we find more of your work?
For business reasons, most of my work is on Amazon, and some of it is on godless.com. At the moment, I have just finished writing This October Flesh, which comes out on the 1st of October, which was lucky because I didn't plan it to come out in October. That's finished. I'm just doing my final read through on that, and then I've got, as I say, I'm quite busy. I've got a Smalls novella coming out on Godless on the 10th of next month. I'll have another one coming out on the 10th of the month after. Sometime in November, the 4th book and the End of All Things will be coming out, which is when the box set books will be coming out, and then the Smalls book will be coming out on paperback in December. I'll stop talking now. That's just what I can remember.
That is awesome, and this should actually be coming out just at the start of October, so just in time for anybody who wants to pick up This October Flesh. I'll put links below, but Ash, thank you so much for your time. It's been brilliant talking with you.
Thank you for having me.